Good.
Okay, so today I am checking in with artist Darren Jones.
Hey, buddy.
Hey, Darren, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And I think we're just going to walk through what you're up to and just take me through some of the artwork that you've been working on or that's in progress or completed that you shared with me.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of been an interest. Obviously, it's a challenging and interesting time for any artist. For me, it's been a little different. I actually sprained my ankle 4 weeks ago, so I've had a good excuse to stay home and be on the couch and let my leg heal. But I've been back in the studio for the past 2 weeks. I'm actually currently working on one commission from a client that commissioned me last week, so it's kind of been a good thing to force me back in here. But I'm trying to let my brain process everything that's going on to see what sort of new collection might come out of this. And I'm always a positive person, and I always try to stay positive, and I think that'll still reflect in this new, but I have a feeling I'm a really textural artist, so I think I'm going to bring in even a lot more texture than I've done before, and maybe a little darker color palette as well.
okay, great. So let's go ahead and get started. Actually, one thing I just want to comment, I think in general, everything that we're going on with people like shelter in place, I think as artists, we're used to being alone in our studio. So I think there is a little element of this that isn't out of the ordinary for artists.
No.
Um, so
Yeah, I'm lucky in the sense that I don't have a home studio, but my studio is really close to home, and the building has no one in it, and I work alone, so I don't see a single person coming and going from to and from the studio. And like you said, I've been in this space for 5 years now. I paint alone, so it's always
right.
it's always solitude. So
All right, so let's get going with.
yeah, so that's one of my series. I titled One Can Dream series. I started this series just about 5.5 years ago. I painted the very first one as I was leaving my old studio space, and then have continued this series in the new space. And it's really evolved as far as the amount of texture that goes on them. It's combinations of industrial staples, there's plaster, beach sand, which I actually bring home from my family cottage in Ontario. So it's got this really great grainy texture, and then plaster, and then the acrylics, and everything's done by hand. So if you see my table over here, I've got two pieces that I'm working on currently where basically I use my hands. So real quick, each layer of paint goes on my hands, and then I'm layering on top of the texture. So it's a really cool process that has evolved over the years. And the very first one, so it was a series that came out of a trip that we had taken to Greece, and I stumbled across this old telephone pole that was covered in staples and so much texture, and it was a sculpture. And at that time, I was doing a lot more of my birch work, and so it took me quite a while to come up with the concept of what I wanted. So the very first one was very rusty and whitewashed, and whereas now I'm really, like as in the red one you were showing, really having fun with the color palette, and they're still all abstract landscape inspired, and they're just a lot of fun to do.
I'm very familiar with the telephone pole with staples all over it.
Yep.
And I've always thought that was extremely interesting. So that's very cool to see that that not only did that inspire you for a piece of artwork, but it's a whole series.
Yeah, it's a whole series. And, and that's kind of where the title came from, because rather than titling each one, I created them all. They all have the series with the name One Can Dream, then with a number. And the whole concept was this pole, because I've seen them here in the US and in Canada, but this one just was so layered. It was a sculpture. It was so layered. And I just pictured of how many years that took. And it was in Mykonos. And so people were posting something to sell, or posting for something to look for, or who knows what their dream was that was posted on that pole. And that's kind of where the title came from. So
wonderful. I'm so glad that you explained that.
Thanks. So I think you've got a few of the images here from the same series. So I'm just having fun, you know. So a lot of times for me, with everything I do, nature's an inspiration, and so a lot of times, like this gray one here, that was inspired by a foggy run along the lake shore here in Chicago, and the colors of gray were just really beautiful coming off the lake and actually going over the land. And so that stuck with me, so I incorporated it into this series as well. So that's typically where a lot of the color palettes come from when I'm working on this series.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and this one here, so this is the second series that I do, which I call my Urban Shore series, and this was really fun. They have been inspired for a few different reasons. So when I moved into my new studio, I have a full view, see the light coming here, full view of the metric tracks, the L tracks, old warehouses, and then all of downtown. And so when I started this series, I was inspired by the lake and the river, and I was doing the grid lines, thinking I was being inspired by the grid lines I was seeing out the window. And it was probably months into starting this series that I came in from going to the art store or somewhere, maybe out for lunch, and I'm in an old warehouse, 6-story warehouse, and I take one of these old cage elevators up. And when the door closed, all of a sudden I realized the exact pattern I've been doing was on the elevator. So subconsciously, I was inspired by my new space and this new elevator, even though I thought the city was inspiring me. So it's kind of been fun. So this series, they're very neutral. They're very grays and taupes and ivories and blues. And, you know, they're not meant to truly be the Chicago lakefront. They could be any sort of shoreline, but that's truly kind of where they come from. And so they're a lot of fun. And that's the commission that I'm working on right now is one in that series.
Great.
Yeah, so this one here, and then I believe the next image and last image you have, these are my latest. And I'm just having a ton of fun with these. And they've all been inspired by my latest journey in taking JiuJitsu. And I started this just under 2 years ago, or maybe over 2 years ago, doing the sport, and started this series. I think I've been doing it for a year now. I'm into the ninth piece, I think, of it. And it's been really fascinating to see, learning a martial art and such a technical sport, how it's affected my brain towards my artwork. And with this series, how it started was I came in from one session and just started applying the texture onto the canvas. And then I actually started with my hands doing the movements of what I had learned. And that's where a lot of the textures come from. And so the concept behind the series is the blue, the teal patina sort of one that I keep looking over here because it's sitting right here. It's a little different than the white ones. Most of them are whitewash, but if you look at them closely, there's probably about 60 layers of color that went on top of all the texture. And the concept is that it's an incredibly complicated sport, and I'll never in my lifetime know a remote amount of what there is to know. But if you watch 2 black belts doing this, there's an elegance and a beauty to this, even though it's a martial art, but it's so complicated. So that's what I wanted this series to be, so that when you glance at it, especially like when you see that white one, there's an elegance to it. It's soft and it's calming, but as you get closer, you realize how complex and how crazy it is actually underneath there. And that's kind of how, one, I feel when I'm doing the sport, but 2, how that's, you know, related to me. So it's been really fascinating to see how something I'm doing physically is coming into what I'm doing as an artist, which has been really fun. So that's why I feel like with what's going on with this pandemic, it's going to stem a new collection as well. I guarantee it.
Okay. Although it'll be interesting to see what that is.
Right. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, and I think for me, it's one of those things that I'm just going to let organically happen. I'm not going to sit here and stare at a canvas and go, oh, I'm so stressed today from all of this. I can't read the news anymore. I can't pay attention. I think I'm just going to let it start organically happening as I work on the next piece or two.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I think that's everything. Is there anything else that you want to say?
No, just keep supporting the arts and support artists. I know what I've been doing on my social media for the past 3 weeks, and I know you were part of it because I highlighted you, I think this week or last week. I've been taking every day to highlight an artist friend of mine that I know personally and sharing their work and just hopefully spreading the love. And, not only just it's been cool to get so many people commenting to me about how cool that they're learning about all these new artists and that they would have never known before. And it's just kind of my way of spreading the love and, pushing it forward and sharing that. So support the arts. We're here. We're still painting. We got to survive.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. That was when I saw that you started doing that, I thought that was awesome. And then I was honored that you included me.
Yeah, it's fun. It's been fun. And the crazy part is I'm like, I started this morning. I posted normally on the Sunday, I do a whole group show of everybody I did for the week. So I did that this morning because yesterday was Easter. But so after I did that post, I started kind of doing my week of writing down who I'm thinking I'll fit in and just making sure. And what's been really cool thing to me and kind of warms my heart is how many artists I know that I consider friends, so I'm not just picking artists that I admire and don't know. Everyone I post, I know, and I consider either a good friend or an artist friend. And that's been kind of good emotional medicine for me.
Yeah. It sounds like you had an opportunity to take a moment to sit back and kind of assess your relationship with the art world, and you're realizing that they're actually real friends.
Yeah, and it's cool, and that I've got some pretty, like you said, pretty cool artist friends, and I'm very fortunate because of that.
Okay, great. Well, this is wonderful. I'm so glad that we were able to hang out today, and it was really interesting seeing your artwork and seeing the thought process and the origin of everything. So thank you for sharing that.